Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the UnTrivial podcast. My name is Allie Nelson. I am back after 3 months away from the show. I had a baby in July and it has been such a whirlwind, but yeah, it's been a really great time. I feel really recharged, really rested after well, I shouldn't say that. I feel recharged in terms of, needing that break and ready to get back into it, but also not super rested because I have a newborn baby. So, last we spoke, I did my Be Right Back episode, which basically was kind of at the end of my third trimester. I was having a super hard time with everything. My pregnancy was, physically pretty easy, but from like a mental health standpoint, I was not doing well. I was diagnosed with perinatal depression, which is basically depression that is onset before postpartum. So you've probably heard of PPD or postpartum depression. I had depression kind of in my pregnancy. And it was pretty challenging just because I am someone who has never really experienced depression before. And it's just like one of those things where, like, in theory, you understand, like, you hear someone say, "Oh, I can't get out of bed. I always feel sad. Like, I know I should be happy, but I'm sad." And like, I had always, in theory, understood that, but also was kind of a believer in, like, okay, like, what steps can you take to combat that? And I was trying to do all those steps. Like, I was going on walks, I was meditating, I was in therapy, I was doing all the things, and it still felt like it wasn't helping. And that's was kind of it was kind of an aha moment for me to realize, like, okay, you can do all those little tips and tricks and that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go away. And so that was pretty hard, but I did get some treatment for it, and I think a lot of it was just like a combination of a lot of stress because we moved back in May. So we moved house, we were doing a lot of projects with the house. We obviously were expecting. I was still working, and it just felt like there was so much on my plate. And so when I stepped away from work, when we stopped doing the house projects, it really, really started to ease up and it felt a lot better kind of in the last couple weeks going into the birth. So, anyways, that's why I left. I'm doing much better now. I do not feel that way at all anymore. It really kind of faded away, especially once I had a baby boy. His name is Heath. Uh, and now I feel worlds better, thank God, because I think it would just be so much harder to be going through something like that when you have a baby and you have to care for not only yourself but others. And so I'm feeling really grateful, but also a deep, deep amount of empathy for those who have experienced PPD and are going through things much tougher than I am. So, yeah, I figured I would spend today just catching up with you and telling you a little bit about my birth, early motherhood, some unsolicited advice I now have as an early mom, and what's to come on the podcast now that we are back into the swing of things. So, yeah, I personally had an elective C section. I know some people really want to have vaginal births. That is not me. I had really bad health anxiety around birth, and I really just wanted to have a plan that felt as controlled as possible and as predictable as possible. And that's why an elective C section was what I went for. I don't know where you're listening from, but in Canada, you're allowed to just request it and the OB or the doctor has to do it. It's not really something you can't get here. And, part of the reason for that too, at least having the health anxiety around it, is because I was reading up on, whether I wanted to do it and, the stats around C-sections and vaginal births. But I read that almost 30%, or just over 30% of people who plan to have a vaginal birth end up having a C-section anyway. And so I was like, well, cool. If I if I even go for, quote unquote vaginal or natural birth, there's a 66% chance that I will actually have that, and a large percent chance that I won't. And, I think the dream scenario would be a perfectly completed vaginal birth with no issues and no dramas, but that's just not the way labor works. And so I was like, okay, I think for me, it felt like picking the one where I knew the recovery would be harder. I knew it was going to be cutting through all those layers, but I also knew, okay, well, I'm not going to plan for a vaginal birth and then have to completely go sideways and add interventions or have an emergency C-section, which is going to be much more stressful. So for me, that was my choice. I'm so happy with it. It went perfectly as expected in that it was really quick. The doctors were really informative. He was born in like the first 5 minutes of the procedure. And then the last like half hour, 40 minutes of the procedure, we were just doing like skin to skin. And the husband was there. And so it was kind of like I didn't even pay attention to the rest of the procedure, and it was behind the curtain anyway, so who cares? But yeah, it was really great, and it was again for me, someone who really likes predictability. It was the best choice I could have made, and I would be doing it again if I am lucky enough to have a second baby. Yeah, I was at the hospital for 2 days. And the recovery was hard for me, I will say. Like, my OB told me that I'd be, like, up and walking in a couple of days, and that just, like, was not the case. I could, like, maybe walk around the hospital room, like, once, and then I was kind of in bed for at least 2 weeks, which was okay because I kind of wanted to follow that 5-5-5 rule anyway, and if you're not familiar with that is, it's basically after birth, you aim to spend 5 days in bed, 5 days on the bed, and 5 days around the bed, meaning you're like really slowly increasing kind of your activity and your time away from rest, but it's really slow. And so I ended up just being in and on the bed for 2 weeks. I didn't really go downstairs at all. Like my husband was home and he was looking after me. And then in my third week, maybe I started going like up and down the stairs a little bit. But yeah, like my husband would just deliver the baby to me for feedings and we would just nap a lot in the bed. And so, even though it was a little bit tougher, I would say physically than maybe a really textbook vaginal birth would be, it was really nice at the same time in terms of just really getting to prioritize rest and being in a position where I was kind of taken care of, which was really nice. And then, went to my 6 week checkup. I'm all healed. There was no complications afterwards. So that was all good news. And now I'm like fully back to normal. I can walk, I can run, I can exercise, I can do all that stuff, which is great. And so I'm feeling 100%. In terms of early postpartum and being a mom, it's so much better than I was anticipating. And I don't know if that's just because I am an anxious person and I was probably on this like anxious side of mom talk where like, I'm kind of preparing for all the things that can go wrong and hearing about all the things that are so hard. And I kind of was inundated with those types of messages and communications. And so when I had the baby, it was actually, like, pleasantly surprising, like, it was really nice, I think because and it's a quote, I think people say it all the time, it's like, "You felt sleep deprived, you felt stressed before, but you've never felt, like, the level of love that you do with a baby," and those were, like, the truest words for me, like, I immediately was just so excited and, like, happy about having him and getting to look after him, and so it's all-consuming, but it has been in the best way for me. I'm someone who, like, before having a baby, I needed, like, 9 hours of sleep a night, like, sleep is no joke for me, and I, like, would be a zombie if I had really any less than that, which is sad to admit, but it's true, like, I'm a 9 plus hours kind of sleeper, and in the early days of having a baby, you have to wake them to feed every 2 to 3 hours, and so you are up, like, all day, all night, and you're kinda, like, just grabbing naps when you can and sleeping when you can, but, it was easier to adjust to than I anticipated because you still kind of get the sleep, it's just very chopped up in the day. And I know people hate the advice of like sleep when the baby sleeps, but it was genuinely like what we did in the early days when you're not going to sleep 10 hours, 9 hours, 8 hours at night. So if he's napping at 2 in the afternoon and you're just there, you should nap too. And so that's what we were doing. So I was still getting a good amount of hours. It was just like 2 or 3 hours at a time, which sounds hard, but it was better than I anticipated. We are like slowly getting into a routine. He's 3 months old now, and so his, like, naps are a little bit more scheduled, his sleep is a little bit more predictable, and so we're, like, kind of getting into this great space with him, but, yeah, it's no joke. It is definitely life-changing, but yeah, it's life-changing in a really good way. Because I think I was someone who, before having the baby, I was so scared because I love my life, and I was like, "Do I wanna turn my life upside down because it's never gonna be the same, it's not gonna look anywhere near the same, and I really like it." But it has changed, it has flipped upside down, but it's really great. It's still in a way that's really positive, and, like, there's so much growth to be had in having a child and becoming a parent and figuring out this, like, new way of being and this new person that you're looking after, and so, yeah, I've just been really, really enjoying the time and really enjoying maternity leave, just taking that space to bond and get really attuned with baby. So, to answer some questions, what is the hardest thing about early motherhood? And this will be different for everyone. It's so baby dependent, it's so individual, the type of person you are and what you struggle with and what comes your way. So, for me, the hardest thing has been breastfeeding. And breastfeeding, I would say for myself, hasn't even been like challenging, I guess, in the way that it can be for a lot of people. Like for someone like myself who he latched pretty quickly and my milk came in right away and I haven't struggled with supply. Like I have those basic check marks done and it was still so challenging. Like those early days of just trying to get that to happen and you're feeling really drained already because you're not sleeping and then you're feeling drained literally because the baby is feeding all the time. Like I would say that was really challenging for the first few weeks. And then once, we got in a rhythm, it's been better and now it's great. It's fine, but like the first 2 to 3 weeks, oh my gosh, like that was definitely so challenging. And for something that's meant to be so natural, it is really not intuitive. It's really, really something I struggled with and might not be the case for everybody, but that was for sure the hardest thing for me. The best thing about having a baby or about motherhood so far, I would say, is just how, oh my God, like how much like love and like wonder you have for your little person that you made. And it's like just seeing them grow every day and change and start to become more of a person, or even just like start to notice things and start to recognize you and start to smile. Like every little milestone is just like so magical and so exciting. And I just love it. I love seeing him grow into a little more of a person every day. And it's not like he can even talk or walk or say anything yet, but you still feel like they're just growing and changing so much before your eyes. And it just like, I don't know, it's filled me with so much like love and pride and yeah, just like so awesome. The most surprising thing about motherhood, there are two things. So one, I had no idea newborns were such loud sleepers. Like they are, it's called active sleep, and they basically sound like they're like wailing, wincing, they're moving, they're doing everything and they're asleep. And so you obviously think they're awake and you need to go like soothe them or pick them up or feed them. And their eyes are closed and they're passed out. And so that took some getting used to because in the early days, I just wanted to jump at picking him up. And then it's kind of like a waiting game. So you like wait. If they don't escalate, they're just going to go back into quiet sleep like 5 minutes later. It's so weird. So, anyway, that was surprising because I had no idea that was a thing. And the second most surprising thing about motherhood is how funny it is. Like, I have never laughed this much in my life, like on a daily basis, just at like the faces they make, the sounds they make, like their comedic timing of doing anything and like wiggling. Like, it is just, it's so funny. And me and my husband just laugh and laugh and laugh at everything he does. And it just is, yeah, better than I expected. So if you're someone who is worried about motherhood or scared about it, my experience has been that it's been a lot a lot more exciting and calm and better than I was anticipating. Because I'm kind of someone who like kind of anticipates the worst or expects the worst, and then anything better is like bonus. And I think that serves me in a lot of ways, like even just with like preparing for the baby, like I have a lot of anxiety. So it's like I bought all the baby Tylenol and the gripe water and the different kinds of swaddles and like all this stuff that I thought we might need, I just got in advance. And so when we did maybe need them and like our baby was struggling with something, we already had it. And so that like brought a lot of calm actually once the baby was already here. So I'm kind of like pro over preparing and over planning and then feeling like a little bit calmer about the challenge when it arises because you know you've prepared for it, if that makes sense. I'm also in the thick of my master's program. I think I shared a couple episodes ago that I'm doing my master's in mental health, which I'm so excited about. And so I was kind of nervous to start it with a newborn, but I decided to just do like a half course load this semester to ease into it because I had no idea what our baby was going to be like. And luckily, it's been manageable with one course. And so next semester, we're picking back up to full time. And yeah, I'm just excited because I feel like one thing I had heard a lot of moms share, just like on Reddit and online, was basically that they felt like they didn't really have adult conversations or something for themselves, and a lot of people kind of lose their identity in motherhood, which I totally understand because it is a 24/7 job. But I'm really happy I've kind of kept something for myself and have school to focus on and also have this podcast to focus on to make sure I still feel like I'm having these interesting conversations and like working my brain in a different way. And yeah, I'm just loving that. But people think I'm crazy that I'm doing that with a newborn, but it actually hasn't been too bad. So I think you can do more than you anticipate, or just try it. And if it's too hard, take a break. We had a lot of fail safes that we talked through because I was like, what if it's so hard? And my husband would be like, just take a leave of absence and you'll pick it back up later. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's true. So I'm really, really excited about school and also picking back up this podcast. In terms of the podcast, we are back again. I still had so many episodes in the backlog that I'm so excited to start sharing now with you. So I'm back to editing, I'm back to posting, and our next couple episodes I think are really exciting. Obviously, I've been talking a lot about motherhood, but the next episode is actually about being child free by choice and people who deal with being regretful parents. And so it's really interesting and it's like a different side of that coin. But I also have people who are talking about being sober and the sober curious lifestyle that's a lot more popular with people who are kind of like my age and younger. We've got influencers, travel content creators. I have someone who is a therapist who talks about getting unstuck in your life. So I'm really excited to release all these conversations over the next coming weeks and get back into producing more. So I hope you enjoy everything that's to come. So, to cap off this episode, I wanted to share some learnings about pregnancy and also my own unsolicited advice for moms, people who are expecting, people who might be expecting later in life. Like, these are all my learnings for you that I'm so excited to share. And I hope they're relevant to any of the women who might find themselves in this situation now or later in the future. The pregnancy learnings, I would say that you may or you may not have symptoms that you've read about. Like, I went into pregnancy thinking I'm definitely going to have morning sickness. I'm definitely going to feel, XYZ way. And that was just so not the case. Like, yes, there are some standard quote unquote symptoms, but that does not mean that you are going to have those symptoms. Like, I, for one, didn't have morning sickness, but also dealt with really difficult mental health struggles. And that would be totally opposite for someone else. And so if you're thinking, oh, it's going to be so this and I'm going to have to deal with this, I don't think that's true. And it's going to be totally unique to you, your body, and your own journey. You also might have symptoms that you had like no idea to expect. I think there's a lot that we hear about online or from other people, but then there's also some that maybe just like a wild card. Like, I didn't even know perinatal depression was a thing to have before you hit like postpartum, truly, which sounds really ignorant, but it's true. And I think there's a lot of things like that. I think it's also okay to struggle, especially with body image. I think one side of pregnancy, it's so beautiful and your body is changing in such an incredible way, and you're creating life, you're welcoming life, and your body is doing all this crazy stuff to make that happen, which is incredible. But also, we've been conditioned from the time we were little girls to value thinness and to prioritize physical beauty. And so when you kind of go up against, when your body becomes something different than the ideal you've always been striving for, it's really confronting, I would say. I think it's just a lot of unlearning that might happen. And I think I felt guilty at times for being like, oh, I'm not like loving the way I look today being pregnant, because it is so amazing. But I also think we need to be gentle with ourselves to realize, yeah, it's amazing. And you've been told from the time you were a child that you shouldn't look this way. And so that was really hard to grapple with. It may or may not happen for you, but it was something I noticed that I wasn't really expecting either. I would definitely recommend people take maternity photos, like do a maternity shoot or take your own, because I think I will treasure those photos forever. It's actually such a blip in time. Like 9 months is not very long where your body has changed in such an incredible way. And to have those memories and to look back on that time and what your body could do, like I feel so proud about it now. And I love that we captured that. I'd also say if you can take a couple weeks off before the baby is born, off work or starting mat leave a little bit early, I 100% would. I regretted how late I left my mat leave in relation to like how close it was to the baby being born. And I think honestly, next time I will go off work at like 7 or 8 months pregnant, because it is just so overwhelming. There's so much to do. You are trying to prepare and like learn everything in advance of like welcoming this new being into your home. And for me, I didn't have any younger siblings. Like I've never looked after a baby. I've never really babysat even. And so learning like this whole new life and way of supporting, I'm think I would have given myself more time to focus just on that, as opposed to trying to balance that with my day job and again my other house projects, which was crazy. But if you can take a little bit of time just to focus on your self-care and prepping, do it. I would also say try and seek out community in the early days or even during your pregnancy. I didn't have a ton of close friends who were pregnant at the same time as me. And so I went on this app called Peanut. And basically, it's like, I kind of describe it as like Tinder for moms, in that you're like swiping with other women who are either like pregnant or just had babies and they're in your area. And then you can like chit chat and talk and like become friends, which is, it's really fun. It's like, or, pregnant Bumble BFF kind of thing. And so I found a couple girlfriends on there, and it's just like so nice to have some people you can talk to about the same things that you're going through, because like it is all consuming. And maybe some of your friends who aren't pregnant or aren't moms yet, they just like don't understand maybe how all consuming it is for you. And so I would definitely try and find some people who you can like get into the nitty gritty details with, and definitely check out Peanut for sure. Yeah, those are my little bits of learnings for pregnancy. And to talk a little bit about my unsolicited advice for motherhood, here is what I have for you. So, number one, if you plan to breastfeed, harvest your colostrum. If you don't know what that is, colostrum is basically like this early milk in your breast that your baby eats for the first like 2 to 3 days before your real milk comes in. And what you can do is about 3 weeks before you're due, you can start hand expressing it and like putting it in syringes and freezing it, so that if your baby struggles to latch or eat in those early days when you've just given birth, you basically like have their food source on hand and you can give it to them like in the syringe. You can like thaw it out, give it to them, and that your baby has eaten and it's eaten, what it's meant to be eating at that time. This was such a lifesaver. I didn't even get very much, but we just had a couple syringes worth so that in those days at the hospital, if my baby was like not doing super great or we just like couldn't tell, we would just give him a little bit of colostrum as well. And it just like eased anxiety so much to know that, okay, he's eaten and we can keep trying again, like at the next feed. And so it was kind of like this balance of like easing the anxiety about the feeding because I know which either way it turns out, he's going to eat, but I can keep making sure he latches, keep trying, and then adding a little bit of supplementation just to make sure we're rocking and rolling in the right way and he's not starving. So harvest your colostrum. Second, get a lactation consultant or please see a lactation consultant because as I mentioned, breastfeeding, not super intuitive, very like finicky, I would say. And so in those early days when you might be feeling really stressed and of course like your baby's health kind of depends on them getting that good supplementation, especially because after they're born they drop weight for a couple of days before they go back up. Our lactation consultant like helped us so much even just with like the positioning and getting him in the right spot and yeah, and just like making sure his mouth was like positioned properly. So highly recommend doing that. I'd also say get your partner to help you with nights. My husband and I, we both wake up overnight. I feed and then he changes the diaper. And I know you're probably thinking, why does it make sense for both of you to get up overnight if one of you could do both? It has helped like quell any sort of resentment I would ever have because I don't feel like the burden is all on me. Overnight, we share the load. When he's at work, my work is baby. And when he comes home, we share the load again with the baby. So, like, parenting for us feels very balanced, but I can't tell you how helpful it is to have him like do the diapers overnight when I'm feeding because feeding's already exhausting. And then just having that break where he's changing the diaper where I can like grab some water or like eat a snack. It's so helpful. Another thing, get some electrolytes. I have this like electrolyte powder. It's called like Element. And I can't tell you the difference it makes to feeling like a normal functioning person. You also, which I didn't know, sweat so much postpartum because your body is kind of getting rid of all the excess fluids that you were storing. And so you're constantly sweating. It feels like you're working out like all the time. Plus, if you breastfeed, that is another workout. Basically, you're burning like 500 calories a day on breastfeeding. And electrolyte powder I found like really rebalanced me and just made me feel a lot more energized and like functioning. So I definitely recommend that. We also have like a meal service. It's called Factor. So basically it's not like you have to make the food when it arrives. It's basically like pre-made food that we just microwave, but it's like healthy and good and balanced. And that has helped so much to not have to cook or not cooking in those early days because like the labor of like buying food, grocery shopping, getting it prepared, all the dishes, clean up, that would have been so much more of a load than already having a baby is. So if you can find a way to have meals either prepared for you by loved ones or just ordering like a meal service, it's going to save you so much time and energy. And we honestly did the math on it because inflation is so crazy. Like our groceries would basically be the same price. I'd say like the factor is like only a little bit higher than what we would spend on grocery alone. And so when we factored in like the time to cook and the time to clean, it just sealed the deal for us that we were just going to go that route. And it's been a godsend, I tell you. Also, buy button down everything if you are breastfeeding because you are constantly going to be feeding them. And there's a lot of shirts that aren't super functional for that. So if you've just got button downs or zip downs, cardigans, like whatever it is, as long as it goes down the front, so much easier. And lastly, just like trust yourself, have fun, know that you know your baby more than anyone else. And again, my unsolicited advice is just that. And maybe it'd be relevant for some people, maybe it won't. But I just feel like when people say you'll figure it out, like you genuinely do, you figure it out and it's like great. And so, yeah, to catch you guys up, it's just been like momming for the past 3 months, but it's been so fun and so great, and I've loved it, and it's not to say that it's all rainbows and butterflies, like, there's been a couple hard moments and, there's been some struggles, but, like, really, it's been so much better than I anticipated, and now that I am in a bit more of a rhythm, I feel like I can balance that with the podcast and coming back to a few things that make me feel like me. And so, again, so, so, so stoked to be sharing more with you and getting more episodes out there. And yeah, that is my update. And I will see you guys next week for our next guest episode. Bye.